Hello and welcome to the Knit Girls. This is episode 274, take 2. I'm Laura, also known as Lala.
And I'm Leslie, also known as You Don't Call Me Les. It's Tuesday.
It is. I feel like if I'm getting too loud, let me know because I've been at work since 6 a.m. and like the teacher voice is not turning itself off. So,
I will let you know if you're screaming at me.
okay. It's now 9 p.m. Well, 8:10 your time and 7:10 my time. So,
Yeah, so we're recording a little late because we recorded once on Sunday, and then when I got ready to start editing, there was no sound. And believe it or not, it would probably take me 3 or 4 days to add subtitles because we talk a lot.
we do.
So,
And I feel like we should release like 1 minute subtitles, but like have it like the bad like old translated films where it's totally different. I feel like we should totally do
that would be a fun exercise one day.
that. Leslie's like, no, that's work.
It would surprisingly be work for me instead of work for Laura, but
Well, there is that.
so anyhow, this is a knitting podcast usually.
Some of the time.
So we will talk knitting. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to?
Can you go first? Because
Sure.
I just started a row, and I'm decreasing this one around.
And if you start, then you'll forget until you're an inch past
I
that point.
already totally forgot, so now I have to remember when I start this next round to decrease.
So I have only got one thing that I'm sort of working on. I did work a few rows on my Bridgewater, which is
Did you?
Shetland shawl, but it's the edging, and it's only like an inch difference, and I didn't feel like bringing it down.
So the Bridgewater is garter stitch in the middle. It's a square, right?
It starts at the point, and you increase out until it's a triangle. Then you start decreasing down until it becomes
Like
a
a
diamond.
dishcloth, like that old school dishcloth pattern.
Like grandma's favorite dishcloth or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And then you pick up several hundred stitches around, and then you knit in the round. And then once you finish knitting in the round, you start
And that's
doing
lace in the round, right? Okay.
And then once you finish that, I think it's around 40 rows, something like that. Then you start doing applied edging. So for every single stitch,
You work 2 rows.
you work 2 rows to get rid of 1 stitch. And there's like almost 600 stitches. So it takes a while. And I can't memorize the pattern.
Yeah, you've been working on it on and off for a while now.
Right. So, it's actually really good. It's not good for TV knitting because I can't memorize the stupid 7-row pattern, but it's really good for audiobook knitting.
Oh, that's good.
So, I just started Outlander.
Did you now?
Even though I read it years back, but the narrator's really good. So
The audiobook is also like 38 hours.
I'm okay with that. I don't mind long audiobooks. I've had some sci-fi ones that were up in the high 40s. So, anyhow, so aside from
Like
that,
the 12-hour audiobook is really like.
oh no, I really prefer them
That's
longer.
what I like.
As long as they like, as long as it's still interesting, then I'm good with it. So
I'm also like, I prefer my books to be around 300 to 400 pages.
yeah, well that makes sense. It depends on the genre. For like, just
No, it's every genre. I disagree with that statement.
I was looking actually through Audible for a new book like a week ago, and one of the ones that was available that was like on a top 100 list was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is sort of a fantasy-ish one. And I read it 5 or 6 years ago, and it's like an 800-page book. And the audiobook version was only like 30-something hours, so
I wonder if they abridged it for Audible.
I don't know. Anyway, still haven't talked to knitting, really. I'm knitting on the Wheaten cap. This is a pattern by Ann Hansen of Knit Spot. We spoke with Laura up at Knit Spot headquarters, who sent us some yarn for review.
Yep.
That we are both really digging on. So mine, it's Bare Naked Wools. That's the brand. That's Ann Hansen's brand. And
I keep hoping that if I let it sit for a while, it'll like multiply in my
because some yarn does that. This must be a chaste yarn.
title.
Chaste yarn, there you go. So it's 55% merino, 35% de-haired alpaca, and 10% nylon.
Uh-huh.
And it is beautiful. This is the muesli color.
Yeah.
And it comes in 450 yard put-ups. I love their support email is Jeeves at knitspot.com.
Yeah,
That's funny. So this, I think we mentioned this last week. This is probably about as close as you're going to get commercially to a hand spun.
A breed specific hand spun.
Yes. It is absolutely lovely, and I want lots more of it.
On the sweater's word.
Yeah, I would really like. Ann Hansen put out a top, and I'll look it up in a minute when you're talking, about a month ago, and it was out of her.
The cabled sweater?
No, it was like almost a tank.
Oh, okay.
But I'll look it up. And I really like it, and I might end up just splurging and getting a sweater lot for that. But I run really warm, so I have to be really careful what I knit out of it. Anyhow, so I'm knitting the Wheaten cap, and unlike Laura, who is taking little savory bites of her bare naked, I am gorging on my bare naked.
I always take little savory bites of my bare naked.
So many good titles. So this is what it looks like now. I'm about 10 rows from starting the decreasing. It is a very slouchy hat. It's intended to be worn that way. I am really loving how the lace and cable transition to each other. It's a very natural looking flow. I'm impressed with it. I really like the pattern. And it's very lovely.
Yay.
I want it on my face.
Well, it will be on your Well, it'll be on your head. I'm not certain about your face.
Close enough. So, that's pretty much all I'm knitting on. I do have a couple finished
You could do
things.
a matching cowl, and then it would be on your face and your forehead.
I could do a matching
cowl. There'd only be like this much of your...
Yeah.
There you go. Like that Ann Hansen knit spot ski mask that you have created.
So, that's really the only thing I'm actively working on right now. So,
cool.
But you have some stuff.
I do have some stuff. I am in the middle of a row, but I am working on my Grace sweater by Jane Richmond. I totally... So this sweater, why I was distracted looking over at my iPad, is this sweater is one of those like fill in the blank sweater patterns. So the first thing I did when I downloaded the pattern is I went through, and there's like this massive chart where it's like, this is your number A. If you're in size 44, this is your number A. This is your number B. And it goes all the way down to like double Z for all these different numbers. And like I was just reading that it says work decrease round every T, which I put 1. And I'm like, what every 1?
Every row?
It's every 1 inch, but I just
okay.
the inch chart apparently, so I had to go over to the table and be like, "What is this madness?" Every 1. So if you can't transfer knowledge correctly,
it can be a little bit more of a hinder than a help.
It can be, no, but I actually prefer it being written that way, because I can look really easily and compare. So I started with the 44, and I'm actually working the 46 now, and I can see all the numbers for the 44, and I can see all the numbers for the 46. So when you're kind of in between sizes, or can't select a size because you're indecisive, you're worried about negative ease to the fact that like you're overanalyze. When you overanalyze stuff, like that's what I'm doing.
Analysis paralysis.
Ooh, that's a good word for that.
I stole that from somebody else.
Good. Stealing's fun. So like that's one of the things that teachers do all the time. Like they always say teachers are the world's best thieves because they steal stuff all the time. Anyway.
Well, you have to. It's not like you have the time or the money to go make that stuff up yourself.
Man, I wish I was creative enough to make up some of the stuff, and that would be awesome. All right. So this is Jane. Jane is a cardigan. It has lace detail at the very top on both the front and the back. and then it goes down into a body that does have waist shaping, and then goes back out for hip increases. So the body is done. Started the sleeve. I'm a little over 3 inches in the sleeve. Every time I decrease, this is totally a trick that I stole from the TheKnitGirlls. I'm putting one of these ring markers. And since I have to decrease now every inch, I'm just going to measure from that marker. But that also lets me know how many decreases I've done, because I picked up some extra. I wasn't supposed to decrease until I got to 3 inches, but I picked up some extra stitches because I like picking up so it looks right versus the number that they call for.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and so I had to decrease down 4 stitches. And then this was my actual decrease that I was supposed to do. And I think it's, let me try it on. Try on my one sleeve.
It's the new style, yo.
It is. So, I mean, it does have a little bit of the, not bad though, a little bit of the pudge, because it is a top-down raglan there. But I do like, the sleeve is like going pretty fast. Because it is a raglan sleeve, you've already got a good bit of it done. Yeah, it does have like that little
pooch.
Pudge right there.
You know what I've wondered about is sweaters like that, because my Rolling Rock came out where there's a little bit of pooch there at the arm.
Yeah.
Is I wonder if you can treat it like an aftermarket dart, where you could go from the inside and pinch it together, and then essentially on the back,
Maybe Beth was talking about something.
Oh, really? Yeah, where you got like this extra bit, and then you like stitch through it, and then cut it so that it lays. I mean, you'd have to line it up correctly, and you'd have to probably do a little duplicate stitching, but I wonder about that.
I'm not worried. Like, it doesn't bother me. It does bother some people, but it doesn't specifically bother me a whole lot. I've got bigger issues than a little bit of extra fabric right here. Like, that doesn't bother me as much as some other things. Like, the messed up bit of lace at the back bothers me, but I had to drop down and redo stuff, and it's not quite perfect, but I'm thinking it's going to block out.
I will accept a not quite perfect sweater.
Will you? It looks pretty good on me, though. I don't know.
It does look good on you.
It does have a little bit extra room in this armhole right here. This is the style top that I'll probably be wearing it over, so not this dress specifically, but man, if this dress came in other colors, ModCloth and I, we'd be like, my whole check would go there. But so a ways to go still. So that's Grace by Jane Richmond. I'm trying to think of other things I did because I don't trust her pattern. I don't know why. I do know why. Because it calls for like 3 inches negative ease. And negative ease to that degree scares me. So I did add a little bit. Probably half that pooch is my fault because I added extra rows and extra stitches. Because everyone said the armholes were too tight. But I have like weird...
So it's like a self-imposed pooch.
Yes, because I increased out. I continued increasing out past the point that I was supposed to stop. Because everyone was like, oh my gosh, the sleeves are too tight. So I added stitches. But on me, they're not too tight. But it'll be fine. It's a good layering piece. I am reserving judgment on this now until it is completely done.
That's probably a good idea. Because you're going to finish it one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm making this a judgment-free zone, stress-free zone until it's completely done. That is being knit on size 2.5, 3mm needles, because even though it calls for 4s, I had to go down to 2.5 to get gauge.
Because you are a loose knitter.
I have this much left of this one ball, and then this much left of the second ball to get the sleeve done. This was around, these two together were around 50 grams that was left over from the body, and then I just have one skein left. But I do have...
And this is Plucky in the barn door.
Yes, in the barn door colorway. Thank you. I do have this giant swatch that I did for this. So that's enough for a good bit of a sleeve. So, or a gauntlet. I feel like I should be like She-Ra or something. Like, if I don't use this for the sweater, I feel like I should seam it and then like deep stitch stars on it or something and use it as like a Halloween costume in the future. So again, that's Grace by Jane Richmond. That is the first thing on my needles. I do have more on my needles. What else do I have? I have socks that I worked on tonight and today, some at work because the book fair is still at my school. This is the first sock, and it does not have a heel. And it's the first sock because I made my sock one stitch less than the other one.
Did you really?
It was intentional. Like, for some reason, this one had 49 stitches on it when I got to the top rather than 48. So I kept this one at 48. So it's, there's a little bit more black on the top of this one. But they are the same length, at least. They kind of match up. So one heel is done on the second sock. And then I will cut and add in the other heel. I'll cut a stitch and unravel it on each side, and then pick up and add in the heel with this cool orange yarn, which I do have a good bit. Yeah, I'm excited because I think this will make good, like, for toy, like the leftover bits of this make good toy yarn. And I am knitting that on, and I do have a good bit left of the actual yarn too, which is amazing because I have size 10 feet. And I did do a pretty high cuff on these. So I do have quite, like, that's not the cuff, this is the cuff. Like, that's a pretty high cuff for me.
Yeah.
So this Lollipop Yarns in the beefcake base does have, now whether or not it fits around my foot at 48 stitches, it should though. Because I typically knit my fingering weight socks on size 0s with 56 stitches. So 48 I would think would fit.
I think so.
Because I'm ridiculously loose of a knitter. So that is, and those are being knit on Knit Picks 1.5s for a DK. That's a DK weight or sport weight. I think it's DK weight yarn.
That's so sad.
And it's sitting in my. It's kind of sad. Sitting in my. At least I can use my 1.5s because there was a point in time where I was like, I'm just going to destash all my 1.5s. I'll never use them again.
Yeah.
But now with sport weight, I can use them for socks. So that's a little bit better because I have a lot of 1.5s and 1s that I'm not probably going to be able to use unless it's sport or DK weight or heavy fingering. And that's in my sloth bag. Sloth. And that's been going to work. And then the last thing I have on the needles, like Leslie was talking about the Bare Naked Wolves, mine is the same base, the Better Breakfast fingering. It's that merino alpaca, de-haired alpaca, which I'm very curious. I'm wondering if it's like a guard hair thing. I don't know if alpacas have guard hairs or not.
I know
llamas do. And then nylon. And this is a really, really nice yarn. It's got a nice tight twist to it, so you can see that it kind of, which I love, because it's not like so much twist that it's really annoying, but it's enough twist that you can play like this, and this would keep me entertained for a good bit of time. But I am knitting Snow on Cedars. It's a pattern by Ann Hansen. It's really, really pretty. It's got the snow. Let me put it on my hand so you can kind of see. It comes in one size, and it's got this snow motif, and then it's got these pine tree motifs. So it's like snow, pine tree, and then there'd be a pine tree right here, and then more snow, and snow kind of on the palm, but I don't think I'm going to do the lace on the palm because that's not super practical for me in my destroy all the knits lifestyle. So I think I'm just going to do a plain palm. This is not what I would consider a beginner project just because these stitches continually move. So when you start a new motif or a new section, like every 10 or 11 stitches or so, or not stitches, every 10 or 11 rows or so. So on row 7, 13, 19, 39, and 53, and I'm on row 39, oh, and 37. You move the stitches around on the needles. So your starting point changes. So just because of that, I don't really consider it beginner lace, but it does have nice clear directions, a very large clear chart. And then a nice, I like the fact that she put the abbreviations for the chart like right there on the bottom of the next page. So I am on row 39. I have to get to 56 and then I can start the thumb, but I'm, like Leslie said earlier, I'm savoring it. So I knit a row and then I'm like, oh, this is really nice. And I just admire my work, which is a good way to catch mistakes too. And I play with it. I'm like, oh, I love this a little bit. And then I'll knit another row. I am using Addi FlipSticks. Addi FlipSticks are a needle that's put out by Addi. It's a German company. They are sharp on one end and duller on the other end. So that yellow one's dull. They come in a variety of sizes. The price point on them is $18 on Simply Sock Yarn Company because that's where I've been getting mine. So it's $18 for the set of 5. They do come in like 4 different colors. So it's those 4 colors. One's repeated for the set of 5. They're clearly labeled, but if you're one of those people who loves your signatures because you know all the purples are the same size, this will not do that for you. But if you're also one of those people that loves to shove your needle with your fingertips, Amy Beth, this might be a good solution. Although I think she magic loops. I don't think she...
I think she does both.
I don't know. It's an Amy Beth mystery.
I feel a little bit like a stalker talking about her on our podcast.
So Amy Beth hosts the podcast, The Fat Squirrel Speaks. It is an awesome video podcast. We are stalkers. I'm more of a stalker than Leslie.
You are. I'm like 3 months behind on her.
Yeah.
I'm terrible.
You're a bad friend.
I am a bad friend. I'm gonna cry.
Oh, don't cry, Leslie.
Don't cry for me.
Leslie Tina.
How we get anything done is just beyond me.
I don't
sometimes.
know that we do get anything done. So, sorry for all ums. So this is Snow on Cedars by Ann Hansen out of her Bare Naked Knit Spot Yarn, and these are size 0 needles. The pattern calls for 1.5s, I believe. Or 1s. Something along those lines. Something larger than what I'm knitting on.
I was going to say, it still looks pretty loose. I mean, not like floppy, but not dense. Not like... You're a loose knitter, Laura.
I would say that it's not super dense, but I don't want lace to be dense. It's interesting, though. We're using the same yarn, and we're doing very different style projects. Like Leslie's doing cables, and with a high twist yarn, cables tend to pop, and lace tends to kind of disappear, but the lace isn't... I mean, it's making the holes a little bit more narrow, the twist, but I like it in this project.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to tell how it's going to look anyway until it's blocked. Lace is hard.
See, oh yeah, I haven't looked to see how many plies it is. More than 1.
At least 3, because there's 3 different... Well, I guess that doesn't... It's not necessarily the way it works.
No, that's not the way it works.
Shut up. There's 3 flies.
There are 3 flies.
So maybe that is how it works in this particular yarn. You never know.
It could be, or they could have carded all the fiber together and spun the singles.
So finished objects.
I don't have any. It's all you.
Oh, I thought you had one.
Nope. You remembered incorrectly.
Apparently so.
I was hoping to get those socks done tonight, but I did have some business at the book fair.
Oh, you had some spinning. That's what it was.
Yes, I do have spinning.
So I finished 2 things. When we recorded the first time, it was only 1 thing, but now we're up to 2.
That's amazing. What else did you finish? Did you add it to the notes?
You'll see. So I have this bargain with my friend Margaret, who has a long-arm quilting shop. Well, I don't think it's a shop so much as a studio. She doesn't, like, let the public in, but she you know, people send out to have her. Anyway, she's Miss Marker's Quilts, or MissMarkerQuilts.com. And I've been working on this pair of socks for her off and on since June, because I'm a slacker.
Are those ones that you already owe her for a quilt that's
No,
finished,
no, I don't do that. That's the reason, like at SSK, when you put out those little like the prizes you put out, like I'll spin for you and I'll knit socks for you.
I still haven't. I'm still doing the spinning ones. I did finish the socks.
I learned the hard way. I do not promise anything that is not completely done because I'm a slacker, and I've got like Catholic guilt level to point of when I owe people something and I haven't given it to them. So anyway, these are the mockery socks. They have a very subtle sort of mock cable pattern that would show up better in variegated, actually, than they are here. This is Apothecary MCN, Merino Cashmere Nylon Blend. The color is Off the Deep End. I've linked their shop in the show notes. And when I was finishing these on Thursday or Friday, I can't remember which day, I was getting to the point where I was ready to start the toe, and so I was measuring them, because that's how the first one, when I'm knitting the first of a pair, if they're not for me, then I'll measure out the size of what it needs to be, factor in how much my toe usually takes, which is like 1 3/4 inches usually, and factor that in and measure it. But the second one, I just try to match to the first. I don't pull out the tape measure or anything. So I was measuring them, and the feet part were matching fine, but the cuff was not. So what I ended up doing, and I feel like a jerk.
You totally pulled a Laura.
Because this is the second time I've told this story, because we recorded once already. So if I've missed something or skipped something, it's because I think I've already told you. So anyhow.
So the feet were matching up. The legs were different.
The legs were different. The second sock, the leg was like 1 inch shorter.
Oh, no bueno.
And these were top down. And I am super lazy. I hate reknitting. So, and
even though she's already reknit this yarn once.
Yes, because the first sock that I tried with this yarn, I didn't gauge swatch, and it was a heavily cabled pattern with lots of twisted stitches. And so it was much narrower than than a normal sock with that stitch count was. So anyhow, this was sock number 2. And I know this because of all the extra ends.
Do we want to talk about how cables draw in stitches, and that's why it was narrower, whereas lace spreads out stitches, and typically lace patterns are wider?
I think you just covered it.
I just did.
So
that's why if you're doing a cabled sock, you might have to increase your edge. You always knit size 56. You might need to increase, but if you're doing a lace, you might need to go down.
Yeah, and you also might want to
Tucky taught us that.
Check your yardage. Like, you might always get away with just 300 yards for a sock, but on a cable sock, that's going to change.
It eats up yardage.
Cables eat up yardage like nobody's business. So anyway, the way that I decided I was going to fix this, I became a surgeon that day because I was super lazy. And at this point, what did I have to lose? You know?
Like you're going to have to unknit them anyways. So
this particular stitch pattern is 6 rows of pattern, 4 rows of plain knit. 6 rows of pattern, 4 rows of plain knit. And what I decided I was going to do was after the first pattern row, or the first pattern repeat of 10 stitches, I picked up the next plain row of knits with 1 circular needle. I skipped a row, and then I picked up the next row with another circular needle, and then I snipped 1 stitch.
That's just like what I do for Afterthought heels.
Yes. But I unraveled it all the way around until I had 2 separate pieces, the ribbing and then the rest of the sock. And I picked up, I already had all the stitches on the needles on both sides. So the stitches that were on this top part with the cuff, I knit another repeat. I knit up to the point where I cut, and then I Kitchenered all the way around. Because I have those 4 rows of plain knits to work with, it really wasn't that difficult. You just kind of took some guts, and then if it had been a really heavily lace or cabled pattern.
If you hadn't had those rest rows, it would have been harder.
It would have been harder. It still would have been possible, but it would have been a lot harder. And I might have pouted and put these away for a little while. So
started a new pair of socks for her.
Yeah. So I've got all these ends that I left in just because I wanted to show you guys that, you know, sometimes being lazy is awesome. Because you
I
know,
like that solution. That's a great problem solve right
yeah,
there.
I learned something. And it sort of was in my head because I've had friends who have had sweaters too long or sweaters too
Yeah.
short, and
I
they,
did that with the sleeves of my sweater, and you've done that before with
right,
sleeves of
yeah,
sweaters.
so you can, pick up and snip and adjust or shorten or lengthen or whatever. Um, so there's that. That's the one thing I finished. These will be going off hopefully this week. And the other thing that I finished, I actually started on Saturday, maybe?
Sunday. Sunday or Saturday?
I think I
Saturday
worked it on
morning.
Saturday, and then I started
Yeah.
weaving on Sunday. And what I was weaving,
I still think you need to show the picture of the warp, though. So let's start with the warp.
so the warp is from Into the World. I got this at Rhinebeck about a month ago. The colorway is Godswood, and it's a BFL, I think. No, it's Superwash Merino Nylon. I have another skein that's a BFL. So, and the way that she tells you how it's dyed. So, Chris and James of Into the World, they have several different methods that they dye.
They just got a new studio space,
They
so they'll be
did.
able to up production, which is super exciting.
So, this one was palindrome. So, basically, that meant that if you opened the skein up and it was a circle, you would have, let's say there's 3 colors. You would have colors 1 and 2 or on each side, and then between those there'd be colors 1 would be on the edges, colors 2 would be in the center or beside that, and color 3 would be in the center. So it would be the same all the way around,
Uh-huh.
the same essential in even spaces. I feel like I just really messed that up. A palindrome, think of it like when applied to vocabulary, it means the same thing backwards and forwards. So like read cars,
Dad.
dad, mom, yeah. Where the only palindrome word I know off the top of my head was actually, it's not really a word. Something, a password for a system 10 years ago that somebody made. Things that I remember. So this is what it looks like.
Whereas I'm like, Mom, Pop.
That's much better.
I don't know about that.
So I warped it, the loom. I'm gonna pull up a picture. Alright, so I warped the loom, and I did that by stretching out the yarn and counting how many color repeats were there until, ugh, I hate that it does that.
Angle it a little bit more. Yeah.
There we
maybe.
go.
Kind
So
of
that's my couch is the spacer between my loom and the peg where I had everything wound off. So you can see the colors are blocked already, the way that I put it on the loom.
You can also see Fred.
You can. Fred is underneath, and he was not bothered. He didn't care.
He's like, I'm so lazy. You
Yeah.
can do all the things on top of me, and it does not matter.
So this particular method of weaving is called ikat, I-K-A-T, and you can Google that, and there's directions on how to do it that are much better than my babbling. So that was my warp thread, and the weft thread is the thread that goes the opposite way.
And the warp is supposed to be stronger than the weft.
Yes, and it definitely was in this case. So what I ended up using for the warp was something that I got when I was with Laura this year at Maryland
Weft.
Sheep and Wool. The weft, yes, you're correct. The one I was actively working back and forth, back and forth. That's the weft.
The one that goes on the shuttle.
And it was a 50-50 Bison silk blend that I got from the Buffalo Wool Company.
In a cone. On a cone.
And wow, I totally skipped some threads there. So I finished it late last night, and it was a gray, sort of a silver gray. So
Ooh.
this is it's very light and airy. So it's definitely not going to be a warmth thing.
And you did not hem stitch.
I did hem stitch. I just used the thread is so thin, it's difficult to see, but I did hem stitch.
Okay. I thought so you can actually chop off that bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I will probably go back through with the sewing machine right on the edge just because I'm paranoid. But yeah, once you've hem stitched, you can trim it short. So, it's all done. It's
Yeah,
really
it's
long.
pretty.
It's very light. It'll
Are you
probably.
gonna use it as a scarf, or are you gonna use it as fabric to create something else?
It's not dense enough for fabric.
Okay.
It's like you can see me through it, so
Yeah.
it's not dense enough for fabric. Although I
Have
do
you
want to
given it a
make.
wash yet? Because it'll shrink, right?
Yeah, I'm going to wash. I mean, I'll hand wash it because it's got
Oh.
silk and bison and all that. But um, I do want to weave some fabric to use. I want to make some little like pouches, and
Uh-huh.
I want to weave some fabric to do that, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So this will be a gift for somebody. I want to
Cool.
wash it and make sure that the parts that like the threads that I skipped accidentally aren't a huge glaring error.
If not, then it can be for you.
Yeah, if it's too messed up, then I'll keep it for myself. And that's it for me for finished objects, and both of those are not for me.
Cool. I have some spinning. I have three finished bobbins. So what I am doing right now is I am spinning on something that I owe someone from SSK, but it's on the wheel, and I'm not going to bring the wheel in here. It's on the Ladybug. The first bobbin is done, and I forgot it again. But I'll show it to y'all. Hopefully, I'll get it finished this weekend and plied, and I'll show it to y'all next week. But what I am what I worked on a lot last week is because I'm trying to spin. My local knit night meets at my house, and I've been spinning during knit night, which is a great way of getting like 3 hours of spinning in
Mm-hmm.
because I can spin and chat a lot and not. Although I'll probably work on the sleeve this week, and not get too caught up in stuff. Like get caught up in stuff where I don't change my hook, but that's not a disaster like missing 8 sets of decreases would be. So. I have 2 bags of Hello Yarn. It's kind of like odds and ends that she calls her patchwork kits.
Mm-hmm.
So it's little bits and bobs that have been left over from the dyeing, or that she's broken up, and because she'll dye like 5 pounds and then divide that by 4 ounces. It might,
Yeah,
there
she
might
might
be a
end up
little
with
yeah.
something left
So
over.
yeah. So she takes all those bits and bobs and makes these kits. And so it's probably around half an ounce of each color, I would say. So what I've been doing is I'm spinning them all on the same wheel on the Ladybug, but I'm spinning them all on different bobbins. So I have 3 done. So there's this one, and you don't know what kind of fiber they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like luck of the draw. So there's this one. There's the blue bobbin, and these are my 2 acrework bobbins, and I actually got these 2 to go with the sidekick, and the pink's kind of obnoxious with the red of the ladybug, but I don't care. So there's these 2, which are more neutrals. Woo! I'm so glad I did not hang up the phone. So there's those 2, and then this was the first one I spun. So I am going to 3-ply these together. I decided that a 3-ply would kind of help hide any imperfections in the spinning, but also it would kind of mute out some of the crazier colors. So what I'm going to do is kind of like what we did with the 9-plies. I'm going to ply all these together, and obviously one of these bobbins, the blue one, has more on it, I feel like, than the rest. So when I get to when one bobbin runs out, then I'll have already started another bobbin,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just add it in. I did try to restart my computer. Let's postpone that.
Let's do that.
So one thing that I did last week during knit group is I have these bags. They're kind of a little bit bigger than Ziploc bags, and I sorted my fiber out into like sets of 3. And you can tell this one's got like a little bit of silk to it. It's got some sheen. So there's silk in that one. So I am going to, as soon as I finish my obligation spinning, continue with this. And when I get like 9 bobbins done, then I'll start plying. Because I have around 9 shocked bobbins ish. So I have around 9. So, because including my high speed bobbins, which I just use as regular bobbins.
Yeah, I do too. I just use the big end.
So that is the spinning that I have going on. I still have a project on, well, that's a lie. I just put a project on the Reeves, which is a pound of Shetland that I'm going to spin for a sweater project. And I started it, and guess what I got in the mail? Acreworks, because I gave him one of my Reeves bobbins at SSK. He made a Shocked Reeves prototype bobbin.
Oh, how fun.
So Continental Kim and I are the only two people who have them.
That is so fancy.
So,
you're probably two of his best customers, if we're being real here.
Maybe. Perhaps. I don't know. So, I'm going to test that out, and I'll let you all know how it is. I'm super excited about that, because the bobbins for the Reeves are crazy pants expensive.
Can you hear the banging that my husband is doing?
No, what's he doing?
I don't know. It sounds like he's got a sledgehammer to the tile or something.
Maybe he's got a bed that's going up and down. Leslie and I were discussing not old people beds, but the beds that...
They are old people beds, but they rock, and I want one. The Posturepedic ones that...
Yes, because my parents just got one, and I was like, man, that is awesome. So
I'm a hater because I want one.
We were discussing the awesomeness of those beds, which they sell at Costco, apparently. So anyway, these are the conversations Leslie and I have before we start recording.
You think they're risque, but really they're about Posturepedic beds.
So that is it for me for spinning, really. I also have some Cordale on the sidekick that I need. I have like all these works in progress that I need to finish up.
But when you finish, it's going to look like you were super busy that week, and you just, bam!
Yeah, well, the Shetland I started because House Cup is doing like a 3-week Quidditch thing, and so it's got a yardage bonus. So I'm trying to, and that's Harry Potter House Cup. It is an imaginary game for imaginary points, which is super motivational for me.
But you could be the winner on the internets, and that could be important.
I had one of the highest class, I think, the highest class total for points ever, like that's ever been awarded
in your house, or
no, for the entire House Cup.
And how did you do that?
I turned in every single
for Spinzilla
for one class. So I turned in like 14 skeins. It was close to 10,000 House Cup yards for one class.
Wow.
And I got 125 points, which typically I get like the minimum is 15 points, and I typically average around 20. So, but I asked, I was like, has anyone seen, because then I was super competitive, and I was like, has anyone seen something like this before? And so we think it's if it's not the highest, it's one of the highest that anyone's gotten for a class, which is kind of cool, but it's also 10,000 yards, which is typically like an owl, so.
Yeah.
I would have gotten more points if I had turned them in for separate point classes. I would have averaged like 40 per class. 40 times 8 is higher than 125. Last time I checked.
So you didn't win all the things, but you super won that one thing.
That one thing. That one class. I was bombing. I've never seen one over 100 before. Like, I've never seen triple digits before, but I'm sure it's existed. Because I don't pay a lot of
Okay, I'm done with this conversation.
Okay.
We have a book to review that is not imaginary.
You were being...
Look, I let you go on for 10 minutes. That's my line.
Not about House Cup. Anyway, we have an awesome book by Deborah Newton.
Yes, good measure.
It was sent to us from the lovely people at 6th and Spring Books. 6th and Spring owns Vogue last time I checked. Things changed, but they were...
I think they're part of the same group, yeah.
Yeah, they're part of that family. And it retails for $29.95 in the U.S. and $33.95 in Canada.
So this book primarily is walks you through how to adjust, create, modify, remove, add to any part of a garment to make it fit you.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a reference book that just happens to have a good bit of patterns. 3 times 6 is 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 patterns in it. It does have a visual index, which is how I figured out that math. There are 3 bottoms, 2 skirts, and a pair of short type things. And then the rest are sweaters. But really what this book is, it's a technique book that takes you through then using those techniques in garments, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
And it does it in very, I want to say, exhaustive detail. Every,
It's a very mathematical
yes,
detail.
every type of sweater, aside from, maybe some crazy ones, are in here. The different types of sleeves are in here. The different types of darts are in here. It talks about how to adjust for a waistline and how to adjust for, ribbing combined with increases. And there's all sorts
So let's
of.
do like top 3 things that we really like about this book each. Okay, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
sure, I'll go first. Because this is very much a reference book. It it's I would say it is to sweater spinning what Alden Amos's
Sweater spinning. It is
super
the sweater
sweater
knitting.
knitting. What
So what?
Alden Amos's big book of hand spinning is to how to spin X, Y, or Z.
Our principles of knitting is to overall. Well, wouldn't say it's as exhaustive as principles.
No, but it's not something we can easily pluck things out of, primarily because a lot of it is dependent on information that you learned 2 paragraphs ago or last chapter or what have you.
Although there are some great tips in here.
There are. I would say probably my favorite takeaway from this book is how she shows you she has you go through and do measurements, just like most fitting books would. And they're comprehensive. There's 20 something different measurements you take. But she shows you how to apply those measurements into a schematic, how to make a schematic for yourself, and then how you would use tracing paper and graph paper to make a schematic of your desired garment, sweater, top, whatever, and lay it on top of your own schematic and how and where you would need to adjust. To me, it clicked really easily for me of how that would happen and how you would make those adjustments without necessarily investing in the days it might take me to fully understand the mathematical concepts behind it.
So one of the things that I really like, definitely in my top 3, I'm not saying it's number 1, is there is a questionnaire of identifying your personal fit needs. So a series of questions that really makes you think about how you like things to fit.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a large frame? Do details on garments seem too small in scale? If the bust fits, does the hip area on most garments seem loose or tight, or vice versa? Do the sleeves ever feel too tight? So it's the series of questions that walks you through whether, like, what your personal fit needs are and what your personal issues are, and then you go from there, if that makes sense.
And I like that she does it in a very judgmental way, yeah, non-preachy way. She doesn't say if you have this shape, you shouldn't wear a crop top, or if you have this shape, you shouldn't wear sleeveless tops. She says you should make sure that you like the way that things fit you.
Yeah.
And go from there.
If you don't like how things fit you in the bust area, here are some suggestions to fix that. So that's definitely in my top 3. What would your next one be?
I would say I really like how she talks about adjusting sleeve caps, and that's I think that's in the 3rd chapter here. When she's talking about, so she walks you through and uses some patterns as guides as how she made certain adjustments. But one of my favorite ones is how she talks about adjusting for a sleeve cap, and she shows you the different types of sleeves, again, with a schematic, which really makes things easier for me to understand. But she talks about how, especially if you're doing, where you're setting in the seam, regardless of what type of sleeve it is, how you can set in only half of it up to about the middle of your armpit and leave the top part of it open, and then essentially pin it down and look and see how it fits. And if it's too tight, you can pull out the bind off and add a few extra short rows to give it a better curve. If it's too loose, you can pull out the bind off and a few rows and do some more rapid decreases. And and because the way that the shoulder fits can make or break the sweater.
Yeah.
She talks about ways to adjust for that without having to redo the whole cap. So that was a really valuable bit for me.
Definitely. I like, she talks about fit on the simplest of garments, so things like ponchos and scarves, and she recommends because like choices about length and width can definitely make things appear different on your body.
Mm-hmm.
So she talks about going to like a local fabric store and getting some knit fabric and penning it to the size, the dimensions that you're thinking about knitting, and seeing how that looks on your body type.
Right.
And she does something similar with sweaters as well.
Right. With she that's one of the tips early in the book is you can essentially go to a secondhand store or a Goodwill and buy a big men's sweater and then essentially cut it out to the schematic of the sweater that you want to make, and baste all the edges together and try that shape on you to see how you like the way that it looks, which is essentially the same as what Laura mentioned, where you can buy the fabric off the bolt at your local craft store, do the same thing, and see how that shape looks on you. It's like how sewers do muslin for themselves. So it's very similar, and it's just something I'd never really thought of doing, but it's, flicks that light on in my brain and makes me think. So
yeah. So I think if you are someone who sews, this book has a lot more valuable tips and tricks.
There's crossover, yeah.
Not. There's a lot of crossover, which is good, for sure. What would your last thing for your top 3 be? I'm limiting Leslie to 3.
Well, because we talked about this book like 30 minutes when we recorded the first time.
But I think each giving 3 is a good way of doing it.
I agree. I would say we talked about how this book is very detail oriented and a great reference book, and so the book is almost 200 pages, and the first 130 some odd pages are all informational, and the last 30 or 40 are patterns, which are sized really well.
But it's like fit labs is what she calls them, and it's taking those fit things and making them work.
So I would say one of the most beneficial sections, the third beneficial section for me, is she talks about in chapter 5, I think, all about alterations. So she's talked in the first 4 chapters about the specifics of, if you want to make it this alteration, do this alteration, do this. But she has a succinct little 1-page how-to for, you've picked a sweater, now what? And so she breaks it down into, 6 or 7 easy little sections where you can guarantee, as much as you can guarantee anything, that you will get an item that you like the way that it fits and feels on you if you follow these, general concepts referenced back in the first sections if you need more information on how to do these things. I feel like I'm not doing this book justice. Mainly, it might just be because it's late, but it really has some great information.
Oh, yeah. So my third favorite thing, are you done with your third?
I am, go ahead.
My third favorite thing would be in the Fit Lab, there's a neckline gallery.
Yes.
And so this is the same sweater, like that same cable detail on each, and the moss stitch, but how it looks in a V-neck versus a higher crew neck.
I love that tuxedo neck.
That tuxedo neck.
I love that.
I've never seen before, which is really, really interesting. And then there's
the mock turtle.
Yeah, a mock turtleneck. So how just changing the neckline, but she also goes into a little bit further how how there's a correlation between shoulder, armhole, and neckline, and how you kind of have to adjust all 3 in order to adjust the neckline. And that's really, really interesting to me. So this is Good Measure by Deborah Newton. Knit a perfect fit every time. It is $29.95 in the U.S., $33.95 in Canada. Again, Sixth and Spring was generous enough to donate this to us for review. I think it's a really... Do you have any last thoughts that you want to summarize?
I think that if you are looking to get into garment design, you need this book. I would say if you are frequently unhappy with how your garments fit you, you need this book.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's good to combine with like Amy Herzog's custom fit book.
right, because they
And
may cover the same subjects, but they do it in such vastly different ways that you don't know which one's going to appeal to you. I would say this is absolutely worth checking out, at least at your local library, to see if the dialogue and the way that she presents her suggestions is something that
tone and voice and
right.
book. Yeah.
I found her to be very easy to understand.
Uh-huh.
I tended to shy away from the sections where she went into math too much, but that's my own hang up, not hers. So yeah. I give it a resounding thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing. It's a great addition to a reference library. And like Leslie was saying, if you are designing or need to troubleshoot some areas that you are unhappy with sweaters that you are knitting, this is a great one. This is a great one to add to if you're doing hashtag Project Sweater Chest. Mm-hmm. To your library for that as well, which I always forget. I mean to say that I'm knitting this for Project Sweater Chest every single time, and I always forget.
You know what you should knit it for? The matchy matchy cowl, and make me one.
Oh yeah, I'll get right on that. So my sock weight yarn sweater, sure. Let me just whip out a second one.
You should.
Mm-hmm. So that again is Deborah Newton's Good Measure book. We do have a question from Little Critters. We kind of skipped a bunch of questions. We'll go back, but I felt like this was one that needed to be addressed in a timely fashion because she is looking to sell something. So it does say, I love listening to you guys. I'm starting to dye yarn and roving. I have kettle dyed some wool roving and is slightly felted in the process. I'm getting ready to vend and I want to sell them. I'm sure you can felt with it, but can you spin with it? I'm just starting my business and I don't want to sell someone slightly felted roving that can't be spun. First off, kudos to you for asking the question, because a lot of people would just sell it and not think about whether or not it could be spun. It is a pain to try to spin felted roving, and as someone who buys roving on a pretty regular basis, if I get roving from someone and it is felted, I probably will not purchase anything from that person again.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If you felt roving, it makes it essentially unspinnable. There's things that you can do, and Leslie's going to talk about one of those, but you can still sell that roving and not sell it towards hand spinners. So you can sell it and make it into a thrum kit, pair it up with some yarn for some thrum slippers or mittens. You can market it in smaller quantities for people to put in bird, like the suet feeders for birds to take away.
For their nest, yep.
For their nest, you can market it as a wet felting or a needle felting quantity. So in smaller quantities for that too. But for hand spinning, it is not cool to sell felted roving.
And I would say if you have some sort of disclaimer, then I would say if you had a disclaimer on the tag that said, you know, this is discounted X percent because it's felted, I still wouldn't even do that, because it would be a one-off thing that you can't prove later, and somebody might say, you know, badmouth you online and say, oh, this person's wool is felted, and it's hard to fight back from that. You know, word of mouth is big in the craft industry. I would say if you don't have a drum carder, maybe see if you can get with somebody who does have a drum carder, because wool that's been felted, once you run it through a drum carder, it opens back up to some degree. It depends on how felted it is. If it's severely felted, there's really not a ton you're going to be able to do with it. No. Besides turning it into a block of felt and cutting it out or doing something like that. But if it's only slightly felted, you should be able to run it back through a drum carder and open it up to some degree. And at that point, it then becomes spinnable.
But I would include that felted fiber in a smaller quantity with other non-felted fiber in like a bat or something.
Right. Make it into a bat. I agree. With some crazy sari silk or...
like you're basically making it into wool neps, kind of, sort of. But kudos for you for asking that question. Yes. Because it's something
Even
that
experienced
you're not
dyers
yeah.
can occasionally run into a problem where, a particular fiber might be more sensitive than its brother, and it might felt with just minimal handling. So,
And if you're worried about felting stuff, maybe dye only superwash fibers for a while.
yeah, it could be a good way to start.
So you get used to handling the fiber.
And thanks to our friend Stacy of Tempted, who's actually let us play with fiber and dyeing a lot.
Yeah.
So we actually know a little bit about it because we've done it. And Laura dyed yarn for a while as well. So we have a little bit of experience.
And dyed fiber there
Mm-hmm.
as well, which was fun. It's kind of like dyeing fiber. You don't want to you want to handle it the least amount that you possibly can.
Because if it's already hot and wet,
yeah,
and you add agitation,
it's going to felt.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're listening to right now, or reading, I am listening to Carry On still. It's at a point, I was having a conversation with a coworker, and she was telling me about listening to The Martian, or reading the Martian book.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, it gets to that point where it's super like, and so you get so stressed out for the character, you have to take a break every 30 seconds, like every paragraph. I'm at that point of Carry On. Like I'll like listen for 10 minutes and then I have to get up and take a break from it. I have around 2 hours left, so that's still going on. It's really good.
That you are hypersensitive to that. And I know I'm interrupting you, but I think you're hypersensitive to that to some degree, because even when we're together and we're watching something on TV, if somebody gets slightly embarrassed, Laura's like, okay, we need to change the channel. Like, it physically affects you. So
I'm very empathetic with characters that are easily embarrassed. Like, sometimes I can't watch Big Bang. I have to turn it. There was one recent that I was like, oh no, I can't watch this one. What was it? I can't even remember what the premise was on that one, but whatever.
So I interrupted you. What else are you reading
you're
or
fine.
listening to?
So reading wise, the fall is a great time for new books coming out. So I have read books by Karen Chance this week. Which I waited for that book for 2 years, and it was very good. And there's a new one coming out in the spring. She had gone over her quota, and it was not like by a lot, by like 300 pages. And so they ended up having to divide the book in half, but there wasn't a good halfway point. So it took them like another year to get the book out. So, but I love Karen Chance and Aline Wilkes. They both write fantasy, paranormal fantasy, but they are not shy of just killing off characters. Like, it's not going to be
That's so harsh.
It's not everything's going to be a happy ending, which is real life. But if that bothers you, those might not be great books for you. I finished the last Melissa McShane book that I hadn't read, the Rider one, which was really good. That one was kind of sad because the first book in that series is about a librarian, and she ends up marrying the prince. Spoiler. And then this one is like their kids falling in love, but the king has died. Like, the main character from the first one is deceased, which is like a little bit. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it still is like, oh my god, he's dead.
Yeah.
This is 30 years later, and he's already dead. So she's not shy about killing off characters either. I also finished the Assassin series by C.J. Archer. I read 2 books in that series. I spent like $30 in books on Amazon at one weekend.
No judgment here, baby.
And read them all. I finished Tessa Dawn Has a Dragon series that was really good. That's strictly fantasy. I had all the names pulled up, but I've closed out Amazon. Sherilyn Kenyon, I am totally done with buying her books after this one. This was the last of her, most recent of her sci-fi books. She does like sci-fi assassin books, as well as some, I was already done with her other series. So this was one series that I was like, ooh, these are still good, and I'm done with them. I'll get them from the library when they come out from now on.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth Hunter. I read both books in her Cameo Springs series, which is like a werewolf romance. So it's shifter romance, because there's all different shifters, and a little bit of mystery. So this past week I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books. So all like real quick, though, like super quick reads.
Still, that's a lot.
Well, that's why I don't have much knitting, I feel like, this week.
You need the old lady bed clamp that holds your Kindle so you can read.
That you broke. Did you fix yours?
I did, because Michael, the genius husband that I have,
Is banging on the floor.
He is banging on the floor. He said, well, you should email them and see if they make a replacement part instead of having to buy the whole thing over again. And I'm like, that's really smart. So I emailed them and took a picture, and they're like, oh, we'll just send you one. And I was like,
oh, awesome.
That's great. Also today, I have to brag on him a second because I didn't believe he could do it. I was at work, right? And I've been in this mood where I'm listening to like 90s like alternative or pop songs.
Have you been listening?
I have been listening to
Cranberries. One of my coworkers and I, that was her first concert ever, so we walked down the hall singing In Your Head. And the sixth graders were like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? No, and I had this song that I couldn't think of the lyrics. I couldn't think of the melody, but I remembered the video, and I remembered that I liked it. And so I'm explaining this to Michael. And
did he find it?
I'm like, it's about a girl who's unhappy, right? It's a 90s song. It's sung by a guy. It's almost like spoken word. And she goes to a bar, but she wishes she was somewhere else. And so, like, that's all I gave him. And he found it in like 5 minutes. It was Sean Mullen's Lullaby song. I'm not going to sing it because I have a terrible voice. But literally, that's what I gave him. And he was like, he asked 3 or 4 questions. He's like, here you go. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he found that.
He's a genius on the interweb.
He really has, he has spent too much time on the internet. He has found the end of the internet several times and just turned back around and just kept on going. So,
that's hilarious.
I was shocked. So I, as far as reading and listening, I finished Nice Dragons Finish Last.
Oh, are you going to do the second one?
I think I might. I really like the narrator. The narrator did a great job varying from like sort of Anglican American men to Russian women. Did a really good job with it. So I
like the protagonist.
Yeah, I do too.
He's
kind of he's kind of like a little bit of a nerdy loser, and love me a nerdy loser. So I might listen to the second one of that. I just started Outlander, and then I am, as far as actual reading, I'm rereading the Mistborn series, and I just bought Burn for Me while Laura was talking, which is an Alana Andrews.
Which we talked about.
We talked about when we recorded the first time, and I forgot to get it because I was angry because the sound didn't record. So there's all that.
I love Alana. And Clean Sweep comes out on the 13th, which is like 3 days away, the second one. So I'm excited about that. That's the only thing I have coming pre-order wise of the 30 books I have pre-ordered on Amazon until the 17th.
I looked, and the next one for me isn't until March, so.
Ooh, is it the Patricia Biggs?
It might be.
You don't like her.
No, it's not. It might.
It's the silver.
Yeah. The Winter King.
Yeah, I haven't. No,
that's not until June.
That's August, actually. I think.
Oh.
No, it's Vision and Silver. It's the Ambition.
Yes, the third one or fourth.
We spend too much time together, my
friend. We do. And we read a lot of the same books. Not, I would say about half. We probably read about half.
Leslie doesn't do ghosts, and she doesn't do... I don't know.
I'm wishy-washy on vampires. Like, it depends on the storyline. If it's too much like, I am a wise old vampire and I know all the things, then I'm done. I don't care.
I don't do, like, the library actually had the new Laurel K. Hamilton, which I've kind of given up on her too, because like the books are 500 pages and it takes place in 24 hours, but it's not an interesting 24 hours. It's just like her having sex for 24 hours.
Rock on, lady.
And the new one is like it's zombie like snuff films, and I'm like, no.
Like, I can say no to that without even reading the description. Like, yeah, that's like, enough for me.
You said that, and I'm pretty much done. Like, I'm done with your series. I'm done with your books.
This is gonna have the longest title ever.
We should probably not put vamp or zombie snuff films in the title. That probably was not going to attract the type of
So favorite things.
Favorite things, it was Wheezy's 61st birthday last Saturday, so happy birthday. It was just a day past.
Yes.
For the first time, but now it's been several days, so happy birthday, Wheezy.
Wheezy is Laura's dad.
Celebrate with cake with him. Mom made 1, 2, 3, 4 cake, which is delicious. When I was there for SAF, so that was awesome, and he's going to have a good birthday, and I still owe him a present. I think I'm going to knit him something. I have something coming that's in a colorway that is superbly Wheezy. So that's going to happen. Just a little PSA. I don't want to really harp on this. There has been an issue on Ravelry with one specific individual. If you are interested in finding out more, there's a group called Demon Trolls. And the Demon Trolls group really lets you know if like an indie dyer has reneged on obligations, or it can be a little bit negative, but it can also be a good place for information. If you're like, hey, this Kickstarter I supported a year and 2 months ago still hasn't sent me my yarn, what's going on with that?
Oh gosh, yeah, it has been a year, hasn't it?
A year and 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. They will have some information for you about the lawsuit situation that's going on for it. So that's not why I brought that up.
I just forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Fun
so
time.
Basically, there are sometimes that indie dyers or pattern writers or purveyors of other items that the craft community agrees to purchase in advance or help fund or whatever, and then those people don't come through on their end. If you have something like that happen to you, you can check out the group on Ravelry called Demon Trolls
group, which is hilarious. But one of the things that's come up there recently is there was a designer who had a group, and she was basically a con artist. You know, there's two sides to every story, but she was gathering information from people, including social security
information
numbers,
she had no
and
logical reason to need.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of do a PSA that even though Ravelry, 99% of the people on Ravelry are awesome individuals, it is never a good idea to give someone information that you just want to be careful giving information to strangers, because you don't really...
Because those people who are going to use it for ill they're going to target people they don't know any better. Yeah. So I would, like Laura said, just be incredibly careful who you give what information to. Ravelry's got a great system for legally purchasing patterns, and they are not customer support, but I would say whenever possible, go through a major system for purchasing something, whether it be through PayPal so you can dispute things if you don't get them. Whether it be through Ravelry if you're buying patterns, because they are fantastic at customer service when it actually involves a problem they can fix.
Yep, and they shut this woman down because she was a pattern seller and she wasn't fulfilling her obligations either. But you just want to be careful, especially at this time of year, giving information, because I know my credit cards are less likely around the holidays to be like, oh, she blew $500 at Walmart.
Yeah.
They're less likely to dispute that because they figure people are doing holiday shopping and put a stop gate on it. So you want to be careful giving your information.
And be empowered to ask why.
Yeah.
If you're giving someone information or money, you are allowed to ask questions.
And sometimes in the aspect of my Kickstarter, they will just disappear off the internet.
Or they'll gripe about you online and then disappear. Not you specifically, but you, the general you.
Yeah.
So that was our public service announcement for the week.
It's been a lot longer than was anticipated. But anyway, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you everyone who has contributed. Patreon, for those of you who do not know, is linked in our upper corner. We have goals there. We do drawings for yarn and hand spun once a month. It is a great way to support the podcast for as little as $1 an episode. If you would rather do a flat donation, there is a PayPal button on our website, or you cannot do anything at all,
and nothing changed.
Going to change for you. So
we are looking at a way to do like a group chat where we can sort of talk live and you guys can talk or ask questions or whatever. I'm trying to find a way to do that reliably with 2 video inputs from separate parts of the country that isn't horribly expensive, so I'm looking into that. If you have a suggestion, I'm totally open to it. I found a couple of possibilities, but there's a severe investment first, and there are some things I don't mind spending money on, but until it's proven, I'm just not sure. We also, if you pledge $5 per episode, then you get a co-executive producer tag at the bottom of the screen. So thank you for those who are our co-executive producers. And like Laura said, if you can't or don't want to contribute, that's totally fine. Nothing's going to change for you. We just are trying to do some extra things, and the Patreon support helps us do that.
Yep. And replace equipment that is slowly going south.
Yeah. So because apparently technology needs to be kept up to date.
My first gen iPad, well, actually, I think it's a 3rd gen iPad, but it feels like a 1st gen iPad is like, I'm like, oh, for Christmas this year, I might be asking for some Apple.
Do you feel like you're carrying a brick with a sticker on it?
Not yet. It's better than like the first, and I'm not complaining at all about that. Like, I will use it till it dies, like it, or will no longer be updated, but or supported. But yeah, I just use it for patterns mostly, anyways. So it's not like I'm using it for crazy. So
our 274th episode, titled "Zombie Snuff Fills Chaste Yarn Sock Surgeon Self-Imposed Pooch," and the big end is now over. We hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again. I'm not gonna use those.
The type of people we would get would be amazing.
Yeah, I would like to see those search results, but I think I'll pass. So y'all have a wonderful week, and we will see you again next week.
Bye, y'all.